Welcome to Season 5 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking with wellbeing experts who can help you to stay well as you plan your exit. If you're almost ready to leave and you need to redo your resume, check out my Resume Revamp digital download. It's a comprehensive guide to making your resume show off your assets. For $49.95 Australian dollars, you'll get pre-filled, eye-pleasing resume and cover letter templates in both US letter and A4 size, a lexicon of teacher terminology with a translation to corporate speak, and a bonus PDF on getting past applicant tracking software. Check out the Resume Revamp package on the product page of larksong.com.au and come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 5. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm really pleased to be speaking with Claire Nettley, who's a coach, teacher, speaker, and founder of Better Boundaries. Thanks so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today, Claire.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, so you're a teacher and a coach. Tell us, what does a day in your life look like?
Well, so the teaching part is I teach yoga. I also teach meditation and mindfulness. I actually only teach one yoga class a week now, but I weave through the principles into working with my clients, and I combine the coaching aspect with the meditation and mindfulness and embodiment practices, because yoga is really an embodiment practice. So I weave those two together and work with my clients to help them be more intentional in the way that they live, help them have better boundaries in their life, introduce them to boundaries. Many people haven't heard of them. And then how meditation and mindfulness can support that and can support a more intentional way of living. So working with clients, I have my own daily practice as well. Meditation, mindfulness, and yoga are big, big parts of my life. And I actually said to a friend the other day, I said, I don't know how people survive without these practices. I really don't, because they're fundamental to keeping me sane and well in a crazy world.
Yes, well, we're definitely in a crazy world.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to go down that pathway?
I suffered burnout about 10 years ago. I was already studying to be a yoga teacher at the time, ironically, but I was working in the corporate world, and I had quite a senior position in a very demanding role, and work really took over my life. I didn't know how to have balance. So something was already calling me with the yoga, and it's one of the reasons I studied to become a teacher. And I suffered severe burnout to the point where it just affected me physically, mentally, emotionally, all aspects of my well-being. And I really had to take a long, hard look at myself and sort of go, I need to make some changes in my life, because it wasn't the first time it had happened. It was sort of, it would come up every few years. I lived a very fast-paced life. I was always on the go. I felt like I had my foot constantly on the accelerator. And life was really just ticking off my to-do list. And eventually my spirit was calling my attention through my body. And it just kind of knocked me for six, and I reevaluated everything and then went down this path. And now it's funny, it's a balance. It's a constant balance and a constant dance, I think, to find that balance of the doing and the being, because we're not human doings, we're human beings, and we're human beings that do, right? So we have to find the balance between the two, and that's what I've been practicing for the last 10 years.
Okay, so can I just take you back I don't want to re-traumatize you, but can you just describe some of the symptoms that you had that alerted you to the fact that this is where you were heading into burnout?
Yeah, so it's a really funny thing, and I have to watch myself really carefully now. but I was already exhausted, but I couldn't seem to stop doing. It was literally like I had my foot on the gas, and I didn't know how to stop. I was crying all the time, just from exhaustion and stress. That's how my body gets stress hormones out. That's why I actually think crying is a good thing. But I was crying a lot. I was very reactive. Everything kind of got to me. The tiniest thing would set me off and stress me out. And on the surface, things might have looked okay. I was performing well at work, but on the inside, I just felt disconnected. I felt disconnected is the best way to describe it. And I felt like I was wearing a mask, and I wasn't sleeping well. I'd go to bed and I would wake up in the night and I'd be writing things down. I was always thinking about work. I was getting into work earlier and earlier and earlier to try and get on top of things. And then I started taking beta blockers. I don't know whether they were the right thing to take, but I got them from my doctor because I was starting to get panic attacks, and I wanted to not show signs of panic at work because I was in a very male-dominated industry, and I felt like I had to look like I had everything together because it was a very competitive environment. So yeah, they were kind of all the signs. My gut was absolutely shocking. My gut health was terrible. They're kind of the main things I seem to remember.
Okay, so it sounds like there were multiple signs that life was not sustainable for you in that way.
Yeah.
And so
and the only way I could relax was by drinking alcohol. Sorry, we've got a bit of a breakup in internet.
Oh, okay. I can still hear you. Keep going.
Oh, good. Yeah. So I would try to relax by drinking alcohol. That's the only tool I had at my disposal, but it only increased my anxiety. But I'd come home at the end of the day and pour a glass of wine to wind down. So I didn't really have, it was either kind of go or stop, crash. That was my cycle.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so the alcohol was one way of kind of self-medicating. Was that a strategy to relax or to numb out the pain?
Probably a bit of both, I would say. I would say probably a little bit of both, but mostly I think a strategy to relax, just to kind of switch off my brain, but it really only makes things worse. So yeah.
Okay. So now you're doing something completely different.
Yeah.
What was the kind of the tipping point for you to leave your corporate job?
It was when I was driving over to my sister's for lunch one day, and I was in the car and I was heading over there, and I felt I wanted to go, but I didn't want to go. I knew I needed rest. So I had this kind of inner conflict, and I was already stressed out. I was worried about work. I felt like I didn't have time to do it. And I was on the way over there and I just couldn't stop crying. I could not stop crying. I stopped the car and I thought, this is ridiculous. This is insane. And I rang up my sister and I said, I need help. And that was it. And then I ended up going over there and we sat down and we kind of talked it through. And I think not long after quit my job and took 4 months off and really kind of went, okay, I need to make some decisions about my life. So I just gave myself some time off. Yeah.
So did you go back after that conversation with your sister? Did you still go back to work on the Monday?
Yes, I did. But I knew that I was on my way out. So I felt so much better because there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I detached a little bit, I kind of went, I need to care less about my job. And I think my identity was so caught up in my work. And that's something I think is really common in our society. I think we get our value from what we do when we talk about productivity. Have you been productive today? And if you haven't been productive, there's something wrong with you. And what are you doing with your life? And so I had to learn to detach my value from what I did and my value from my work. And that was a process as well.
I love that. It's so powerful because I think that's what happens to so many teachers. They're in this situation where they're consumed by thinking about work. I know I was,
Mm.
and I would, when I started to dread the following year on the last day of term 4. So in other words, it was 6 weeks away before the school year started again, and I was already dreading it. I like that was my signal to stop. But I love what you said about that when you went back to work and you knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel,
Mm.
that actually made things better for you.
Mm. Yeah, because without that, all I saw was my situation getting worse. And I have this kind of thing that I say to myself in my life: okay, am I on an upward trajectory in my habits, in my behavior, in how I'm choosing to spend my time, my energy, my attention, or am I on a downward trajectory? Is what I'm doing now serving me in the long run? And so if I'd stayed in that job, I just saw myself in a downward spiral. It wasn't going to go anywhere good. And yeah, once I'd made that decision to leave, I could then focus on, okay, what am I moving towards in my life now? What am I creating? What changes am I making? And one thing I will say is what I've learned over the years is how we do one thing is how we do everything. So I had to make some really big internal shifts in my behavior and in my attachments to work and things like that, because otherwise I would have taken the same behaviors, the same beliefs, the same attitudes into the next thing that I did. So, and I see that often with yoga teachers. You know, they leave the corporate world, but they take the same A-type personality into yoga, and they pound themselves on the mat and they injure themselves and they push themselves. You know, so it was really learning to treat myself with kindness and compassion and to focus on who I was becoming rather than what I was going to be doing, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. So on that topic then, if we were talking to a teacher, and I've been using this kind of archetypal teacher named Donna, who's in her 50s, she's, you know, got lots of commitments, she's wanting to leave, and she's been in the career for maybe 25 years or something like that. She's ready to get out, but she just can't see a way forward. And she's stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. How would you help Donna?
So I would start by sort of helping her map out where she wants to go. And she might not be clear on that yet. Sometimes we have to do away with all the stress and the anxiety on the surface and let what's in there come up. So I may start with calming her nervous system. So this is where the meditation comes in, because when we're highly stressed and anxious, we can't see clearly. So what I tend to do with a lot of my clients is I give them 2 practices. I give them meditation and I give them relaxation. And the 2 are quite different. So meditation is about learning to manage the mind, and relaxation is about learning to relax and down-regulate the nervous system, because when we're stressed, our nervous systems are so highly reactive and highly charged. So I give them those 2 practices, meditation daily and then relaxation a couple of times a week. And I'm talking 20 to 30 minutes of what I call active relaxation. So putting them into a state where the body is asleep but the mind is focused, because it can be quite hard to meditate as well if you're starting out. Meditation's really difficult. So the thing I love about the relaxation side is the mind is active but the body is relaxed. So I give them those 2 practices, and that just starts to calm everything down. I give them some tools to cope sort of daily to get through the day sometimes. And I get them to start checking in with what they're feeling and to name it and to detach from it. So for example, and I still do this now, like I might have a day and I'll go, oh, anxiety. And I just name it. Oh, there's some anxiety today. Okay, where am I feeling that? Oh, I'm feeling it in my chest. Okay, interesting. And but I also do it with other things. I might go, oh, joy. I'm feeling joy today. Or I'm feeling, you know, I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling anxious. And I get them to start really tuning into their experience without judgment and noticing what's going on for them. Notice where they feel it in their body. because there's this saying about the mind is where the kind of soul goes when the body's an uncomfortable place to be. I'm paraphrasing. Someone said it much better than I just said it. But, you know, we can go up into the mind when the body is uncomfortable, when we have feelings and things that we don't want to face. So I start to slowly anchor people into their body so that the body doesn't feel like such an unsafe place. And we can start to establish rapport with the self again. And usually within that, feelings come up. You know, there might be anger, there might be resentment, there might be tears, there might be a whole bunch of stuff that comes up, and we let that surface because that's really healthy. It's really healthy. And then when that's kind of moved through the body, then we can start to talk about, okay, well, what are you moving towards? You know, where are you going? How do you want your life to look? Because in her 50s, this lady, Donna, is going to have a really good idea about, hopefully start to have a good idea about what her strengths are, what her passions are, what lights her up, and start to create a life that has more joy, more meaning. The other thing that I would do is work with her on boundaries. Okay, you're in this job for a while. Let's talk about some boundaries you can start setting to support you through the transition phase. And boundaries are something we all need all the time. So they're not something that you do once and then you forget about. They're something that we have throughout our lives, in different aspects of our lives, with different people. We have boundaries with our work, with our kids, with our pets, with our family. You know, they are appropriate across all areas of life. So I would start working with Donna to look at boundaries. And go, okay, let's talk about, you know, do you know what boundaries are? Because I didn't know what boundaries were. And explore where she may be lacking boundaries in her life and how she can start to use those. And then we can use the meditation and the mindfulness tools to start really getting comfortable with the idea of saying no to others and saying yes to herself. So it's really about building that relationship with herself, building that trust, that self-trust, and learning to find yes for herself, and dialing up that kind of self-care, and then working out what she wants to move towards.
Okay, so let's really kind of knuckle down and identify. I need an example of this boundary setting. When you said about you have it with your animals, we have a big fluffy Maremma, and he's quite large, and
I love Maremmas.
We're in Melbourne, right? So I'm wearing black and he's white and I get fur. But anyway, but last night we had a storm and he was very upset and anxious and he did not want to be outside in the lightning and the thunder. And actually I did sympathize because it was quite, you know, like the whole house was kind of rattling with the thunder. And he came inside and we gave him warm milk and put on, you know, dog music so that he would calm down. But I'm like, I think he might have overstepped the mark last night. Like that was too much, you know, he's a dog, come on. So how do we create those boundaries in a workplace where nobody else really cares about what we've got going on in our lives? They just need to get the thing done, whatever it is. I remember once being getting this look of scorn from a workmate when they called an impromptu after school meeting for a committee that I was on, and I had booked an appointment with my husband to go and see a builder because we were renovating the back of our house. And we'd waited weeks for this appointment and there was no way in the world I was going to miss it, and I needed to leave like 10 minutes earlier than I was still there, but I needed to have already left. And I just said, look, I'm sorry, I just can't stay. And she just was, Elizabeth's got something else on, you know, this really sort of nasty, you know, derision.
Passive aggressive.
And I did have something else on. I actually really did. I wasn't just faking it to get out of it. I actually had an appointment. How do you stand up for yourself in a situation like that? And how do you create space so that you can actually make your plan for whatever else you've got on in your life?
Yeah, well, a big part of it, I think, is so we have different types of boundaries, right? We've got the physical, intellectual, emotional boundaries, sexual, spiritual, and material. And material boundaries are things like your time, your energy, your attention, your money. So one of the things that's really good to focus on in that situation is your material boundaries. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this morning. So in that situation, and by the way, really good boundaries in saying, no, I have something on. And it's so interesting, isn't it, how other people don't respect our time, our attention, our resources, and expect us to drop everything at the drop of a hat, and then get mad with us when they haven't organized their time properly. It just blows my mind. And it's really common, and I come across it a lot with clients. So the key is to get really clear about your own time, your energy, your attention, when you're available, when you're not available, and putting boundaries around that. Because I can imagine as a teacher that, you know, people are always demanding your time, whether it's other teachers, whether it's your students, that there's this expectation perhaps that you're always on call. And what we can do is we can set boundaries around that, right? Because other people's expectations are not my responsibility. So that other teacher had an expectation that you would just drop everything and be available. That is her problem, not yours. And I know that this can be really tough to hear if it's the first time that you're hearing it. And I understand that in a workplace, there are sometimes expectations, but it's about, we have to teach people how to treat us. You know, so in that situation that you had, you did really well in saying, no, I'm not available. Boundaries is also about learning to be comfortable with discomfort, learning to accept when other people don't like your boundaries. And it can take time for people to get used to it. So it might be, you know, look, I can't make it tonight. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but I need more notice. You know,
so actually educating them on how to do it better next time as well. That's really helpful. So we can. I'm clearly still traumatized from that little vignette, you know, that was like 12 years ago or something. I'm still upset about it.
And I get it. It's really it's hard when people kind of put expectations on us that we haven't signed up for. And what I try to do is push those expectations back on them and make them their problem. So I want to be helpful, I want to work with people, but I have boundaries around how I do that. So it's about educating other people. I want to have this conversation. Yes, I can be available to you, but I need 48 hours notice. I need a week's notice, whatever it might be. And it's so common. It's so common now in workplaces where people think you should just be able to drop everything. So boundaries at work, it's about being, it's a whole big thing, but in this particular instance, it's about being more intentional with your time, your energy, your resources, your attention, and sticking to that and honoring that, and then educating other people on how to treat you.
I love that. I think that education is a key component in all of that. Just allowing yourself permission to stand up for yourself and say, actually, no, this is not for me today. I'm not available, and you're going to need to work out a new plan. And I tell you what, I mean, I've been on both sides of that, you know, where we've had some emergency or what we considered to be an emergency, and, you know, trying to get the team to play ball and solve the problem over the school holidays or whatever it was. And, you know, some of my colleagues, to their credit, said, I'm sorry, I don't do that. Like, I don't play that game. And then, you know, but then the flip, then of course, then the rest of the team gets saddled with the responsibility. So really then, I mean, I had another situation where we were told we needed to have some big document ready on the Friday afternoon at the start of the school holidays, and it needed to be ready on the first day back, which is just ridiculous. And what we should have said was no. But what we did was have frantic phone calls all through the school holidays to try and resolve it, which was ridiculous and in hindsight. But, you know, I was like you, I was on that, you know, the treadmill, I was running, the pedal was on the gas, and I couldn't see a way to even stop to say, hang on, what's happening here?
Yeah. And it's really hard, and it's hard if it's a new behavior, and it's also hard if everybody else is doing the same thing. It's hard to then be the person that says, well, no, I'm not actually playing ball here. And I have a great saying that I use all the time, less so now because I think it's become more instinctual now, but I would ask myself, whose problem is this and whose responsibility is this? Kind of the same thing but different. And if someone is not organized and comes to me at the last minute because they haven't been able to organize their time and they need something urgent from me, that's their problem. I don't need to drop everything. So it is really kind of learning again to teach people how to treat you. And I had a great story recently with a client who is on the committee for her kindergarten. And they had ordered some cookies for the kids to sell for a fundraiser. Right. And the cookies were meant to turn up at her house on a certain day so that she could take them into the school. All the parents knew they had to go in on this day and collect the cookies. But the cookie company delivered the cookie dough or the cookies a week early. And they turned up, and she said to me, before working with you, I would have taken those cookies and driven around all the parents and delivered them, because I wouldn't have expected the parents to drop everything they were doing and, come and pick them up. She said, but since doing the course, I rang up the cookie company and said, hey, you've delivered these a week early. I can't store them. You need to come and collect them and deliver them on the time we agreed. And they apologized and came and collected them. Oh, nice. So that was a huge win for her.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that. Yeah. Having been on a kinder committee.
Yeah, right. So it comes back to this idea of whose responsibility is this? And it was the responsibility of the people who were delivering the cookies. And she saved, the tagline for my course is reclaim your time, energy, and freedom. She saved a whole day by not running around and taking care of someone else's problem.
Yeah.
And I think I see it all too commonly that we feel responsible for things that just aren't ours to take care of. And we seem to have these ridiculous expectations of ourselves. And we're human beings, we have limits. And we're not meant to just work. We're meant to work, we're meant to play, we're meant to rest. And I don't know about you, but in addition to working, I have to take care of cooking. I have to take care of cleaning. I have to take care of groceries. I have to organize time with family, friends. We cannot put all our eggs in the work basket and then expect that we will have time left for other things. And I think, before boundaries, I prioritized everybody else and put myself last. Now I prioritize myself, my health, my well-being, so that when I'm with others, I'm present, I'm engaged, I'm not resentful, and I'm all in. Because when I'm with people, I want to be with them and enjoy it rather than feeling resentful and exhausted and, a whole host of other things.
I love that idea of being all in. That's really, that's so powerful. Okay, so if someone wanted to work with you, Claire, what would that look like? What would be the process to come and work with you?
So there's a couple of ways they can work with me. I do one-on-one sessions. I also have a course called Better Boundaries, and that's an 8-module, 25-lesson course, and they can either do it in 8 weeks in a small group, or they can do it at their own pace. And they have about, I think it's 4 months I allow to complete the course, because I know people are busy. And then with that, there's office hours. So I make myself available. I have good boundaries around my time. I make myself available at set times during the week so that students can contact me. They can work through the materials at their own pace and then contact me and say, hey, I've got questions, or I want to role play this, or I want to, ask how to handle this.
Okay.
Course has scripts for different scenarios. We look at what boundaries are, what they're not. We look at self-responsibility, over and under responsibility. We look at things like boundaries with how we treat others, how we let others treat us, how we treat ourselves. Because the foundation of our boundaries with others is really how we treat ourselves. The relationship that we have with ourselves really is the foundation for the relationship that we'll have with others. So we look at all those things, and we look at role playing, we look at different scenarios and scripts and phrases that people can use, and how to get comfortable with discomfort as well, as we start to find our no. So yeah, there are a few options. I'm also working on another 6-month coaching program as well. So if people are interested in that program, they can contact me and we can chat about that too.
Can you just tell us your website?
It's clairenettley.com, and the course is at clairenettley.com/better-boundaries.
Nice. Okay. So before we wrap this up, I just have one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite song?
My favorite song, there are so many that I love, but one song that I really love that always puts me in a great mood is You Can Call Me Al by Paul Simon. I absolutely love it. If I need a lift, I put that on and it gets me dancing around the house. So yeah, that would definitely be one of my favorites.
Oh, I love that. And so it sounds like it's kind of got an upbeat tune and it's a bit funny, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got such a great melody, and all these great sort of different musical influences. It's a song with a lot of soul. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, Claire, thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today.
You're welcome.
Just before we close out the call, what would be your parting advice to someone who's struggling with just heading into overwhelm and burnout? They want to work on a plan and they need to stay well. What would be like your, one sentence thing that you need to do?
I would say, give yourself permission to take care of yourself and get help. I think it's really hard to kind of do this stuff alone. I think get professional help in terms of, it might be a therapist, it might be a coach. Also, I would get so for me, what was really important was seeing a naturopath and getting help for my adrenals, my physical body while I was going through the stress. And then some of those tools I mentioned, the meditation, the mindfulness and the relaxation. So that's more than one, but that's kind of, that's how I would tackle it. But ultimately it's about giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, recognize what's going on for you, that you're not okay, and ask for help.
Claire Nettley, thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Thanks for listening. If you need more support in your journey out of education, check out larksong.com.au and book a triage call. I'm a career transition coach for educators and I support teachers in their journey out of education and into a life they love. I've been where you are now, and you don't need to do this alone.